We have lots of important stories about Tesla to share with you today. First, we'll watch an interview of Uber's CEO as he shares his thoughts on the Cybercab and whether he sees Tesla as a competitor or partner. Surprisingly, he says both can be true. He also praises full self-driving and showed his confidence that Tesla will reach its goals. Second, many may not realize, but many countries continue to heavily subsidize gas cars. Today, we'll share a report that several top EU countries spend $45 billion subsidizing fossil fuel company cars. Third, believe it or not, but after a brief slowdown, sales of electric vehicles in the US are again on the rise. Finally, we'll review a very important patent by Tesla, recently discovered, that will revolutionize their approach to high-density computing. This might give DOJO a real edge in competing against or supplementing NVIDIA. Got Jeff Lutz with us. Jeff is an ex-Supply Chain C-Level Executive from Motorola, Google, and Lenovo. He's currently running his own consulting firm, serving mega-cap tech in supply chain design and manufacturing. Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, Herbert. These are some really interesting stories, so I'm looking forward to breaking them down with you.
So this Uber CEO, he's been everywhere the last several weeks. You see that he's either, he's very concerned. He's been partnering left, right, and center. He's been on shows. Interesting what he's doing, but he's saying really good things about Tesla. Here he is being interviewed, and he says if Tesla develops their own autonomous vehicle, which they showed the Cybercab, and decide to go direct only through the Tesla app, they would be a competitor. If they decide to work with us, then we would be a partner. Both can be true. I think Elon's vision is pretty compelling, and he shares his experience and why he actually thinks Tesla will have an open relationship in terms of apps. So let's listen into what he says here.
For a robo-taxi service. Yeah. Do you consider Tesla a competitor?
Well, they certainly could be, right? If they develop it, it's exactly the same thing that you said, which is if they develop their own AV vehicle and they decide to go direct only through the Tesla app, they would be a competitor. And if they decide to work with us, then we would be a partner as well. And to some extent, again, both can be true. So I don't think it's going to be an either or. I think Elon's vision is pretty compelling, especially like you might have these cyber shepherds or these owners of these fleets, et cetera. Those owners, if they want to have maximum earnings on those fleets, will want to put those fleets on Uber. But at this point, it's unknown what his intentions are.
There's this big debate that's playing out right now about who has the better AV strategy between Waymo and Tesla, in the sense that the Waymos have many, many sensors on them. Yes. The vehicles are much more expensive to produce. Tesla is trying to get to full autonomy using only its cameras and software. And Andrej Karpathy, the AI researcher, recently said that Tesla was going to be in a better position in the long run because it ultimately just had a software problem, whereas Waymo has a hardware problem, and those are typically harder to solve. I'm curious if you have a view on this, whether you think one company is likelier to get to a better scale based on the approach that they're taking with their hardware and software.
I mean, I think that hardware costs scale down over a period of time. So sure, Waymo has a hardware problem, but they can solve it. I mean, the history of compute and hardware is like the costs come down very, very significantly. The Waymo solution is working right now, so it's not theory, right? And I think the differences are bigger, which is Waymo has more sensors, has cameras, has LiDAR, so there's a certain redundancy there. Waymo generally has more compute, so to speak. So the inference of that computer is going to be just better, right? And Waymo also has high definition maps that essentially makes the problem of recognizing what's happening in the real world a much simpler problem. So under Elon's model, the weight that the software has to carry is very, very heavy versus the Waymo and most other player model, where you don't have to kind of weigh as much on training and you make the problem much simpler as a compute problem to understand. I think eventually both will get there.
But if you had to guess, like, who's gonna get to sort of a viable scale first?
Listen, I think Elon eventually will get to viable scale, but for the next 5 years, I bet on Waymo, and we are betting on Waymo.
hardware versus software problem.
Yeah, forget about the name of the robotaxi company. It's interesting. You ask, Dara is known as a very good CEO. He did a great job at Expedia, and the public believes he's done a great job with Uber. But one thing he doesn't have in his resume is making hardware at scale. And he was asked a number of questions about a hardware versus a software problem and a hardware at scale. And then you kind of have to crack open, history books. And theoretically, yeah, as you scale hardware, it becomes cheaper. But that's not how it works in the real world. And in the real world, you have to actually be able to achieve and get to escape velocity on your hardware. And you have to have something that is in the realm of getting to escape velocity. And that's where you have to get the unit economics right first. And this is where you go first principles, non-first principles, and you start really looking at and breaking this down. And if you look at all these conventional companies today, whether they're in China or they're in the US, they're purchasing a vehicle in many respects, not all, but most of them are purchasing a vehicle, and then they're tearing the vehicle down, and then they're remanufacturing it with these sensors. The sensors themselves are expensive, and that's what everybody fixates on. But the transformation cost may be even greater than the sensor. He's right. As we go from thousands of sensors to millions of sensors, the cost of those sensors will come down. And they're making better sensors. They're miniaturizing them. It's getting better as well. But there's no home for them at scale right now. And as long as you're tearing a vehicle down and you're remanufacturing it, I would venture to guess that the remanufacturing costs are approaching the cost of the sensors themselves in many respects. And that's the fundamental problem they have to get around it. They have to land on a vehicle. This is the work that Tesla does. These are the decisions that Tesla makes, so that when they produce a vehicle from the ground up for the first time, it's got the computer in the right spot. It's got the right production from the elements. It's got the right power consumption. It's got the right power being fed to it. The cameras are in the right location. They've passed a reliability profile. They understand that, the degrees of movement that occur over time and vibration. All these things Tesla has worked through, and they build the car once and it goes out the door. And I would venture to guess that right now there is a many $1,000 gap in the hardware in the Tesla vehicle versus these remanufactured robotaxis. So I think it's a fallacy to say that if you just do more of these robotaxis and you just do this remanufacturing method, you're going to be fine. It's the same thing of vertical integration versus a discrete supply chain. If you could vertically integrate something and you can get to the ABC cost structure of your supplier, but then not have to pay that margin out, you'd vertically integrate. So if forever they're going to be in this remanufacturing loop of rebuilding these vehicles, they're going to have a cost disadvantage in that remanufacturing loop. So I disagree with that, actually. But I do agree with the premise that he's making a bet over the next 5 years. And how many rides is he going to be giving over the next 5 years? And how many could he give inside of a Tesla solution versus a non-Tesla solution? He's making a bet. But I also think he's also being a very good negotiator, and he's left the door completely open, wide open for Tesla. And you also heard some nuggets in there that they basically haven't had a conversation where Tesla says, I'm doing the following, I'm doing X, and we'll partner at Y point in time, or we won't partner. You can tell that the conversations have been limited in that realm. Finally, the cost per mile that Elon talked about in WeRobot is many times lower. There's been these theoretical conversations about where Uber can get, and where does it get to the point where you just don't need to own a vehicle anymore because the cost per mile is so much lower and the availability of vehicles is so high. But they've never reached that. If you live in suburbia or you live in other places, it's expensive. If you were to take Uber as your primary source of transportation, it doesn't work. So the question is when do they get to that level of scale? It sounds like they know that they need autonomy to get to that level of scale. But again, I go back to some of these robotaxi solutions. They're really for defined areas. I can't go from suburbia to the city right now in these solutions. I can't reliably do that. And the question is so here's my final point. It's not a given that something is just you're going to build more volume of it and it's going to get to the cost structure you want. That is not a given. You have to start with the right cost structure. You have to start from first principles. And when you saw what Tesla is doing with wireless charging, for example, with the cleaning, with the design of the vehicle where it's all Z-axis and there's no humps or movements for that cleaning operation to go from one axis to the other. These are all decisions to reduce movement, to reduce process steps, to reduce process time, and to reduce the total cost of maintenance. All these things figure into the total cost of delivering these solutions. Not remanufacturing your vehicle, making decisions about 2 seats versus 4 seats, making decisions about mass and battery size. There isn't another vehicle like the Cybercab that we were shown. There are robotaxis that are being built that are supposedly around that price point. They don't look that great, and it's not clear how well they even function. And okay, so so Tesla's still a couple of years away as well. So they have time as well to improve. So this is a question of, do you have the right plan? And do you have the right efficient plan to do at the unit economics of one that is something you would want to scale? I would say I think it's questionable. Outside of the Tesla solution, I would say it's questionable right now. Who else has it?
Yeah, I think it was very telling, like you said, that the Uber CEO said, Dara, right? It depends on what Tesla decides to do. If Tesla lets us have our app, then we'll be partners. But if they don't, then we'll be competitors. And then there's a question of if people start buying autonomy instead of getting Uber, especially if the price point is so much more competitive, like 20 cents a mile instead of $3 a mile. That's ridiculous. That's like 10%. What would happen to Uber's app? So let's listen to it.
This was, I feel like, maybe your most consequential decision to date as the CEO of this company. If you believe that AVs are going to become the norm for many people hailing a ride in 10 or 15 years, it's conceivable that they might open up the Waymo app, right? And not the Uber app. Waymo has an app to order cars. I use it fairly regularly, right? So what gave you the confidence that in that world, it will still be Uber that is the app that people are turning to and not Waymo or whatever other apps might have arisen for other AV companies?
I think first is that it's not a binary outcome. Okay. I think that a Waymo app and an Uber app can coexist. We saw it in my old job in the travel business, right? I ran Expedia, and there's this dramatic, is Expedia going to put the hotel chains out of business, or the hotel chains going to put Expedia out of business? The fact is both thrived. And there's a set of customers who books through Expedia. There's a set of customers who books Hotel Direct. And both businesses have grown, and interactivity in general has grown. Same thing if you look in food, right? McDonald's has its own app. It's a really good app. It has a loyalty program. Starbucks has its own app, has a loyalty program. Yet both are engaging with us through the Uber Eats marketplace. So my conclusion was that there isn't an either or. I do believe there will be other companies. There'll be cruises, and there'll be WeRides and Waves, et cetera. There'll be other companies and self-driving choices. And the person who wants utility, speed, ease, familiarity will choose Uber. And both can coexist, and both can thrive, and both are really going to grow because autonomous will be the future eventually.
What do you think, Jeff?
I think he's got less than a year to figure out what they're doing. Because remember, we don't have to wait for the Cybercab. We have 3s, Ys, S's, and X's. We'll have close to probably 3 million on U.S. roads by the time Tesla starts going for this approval in Texas and in California, which are two of the main markets that Waymo, that some of these, I would say some of these taxi services are in now. And remember, when Tesla flicks a switch, I mean, there may be a by state element, but the capability is there, so that the time between lighting up other localities, there isn't as much of an engineering operation that Tesla has to do to light up those other areas. So I was having this conversation with somebody, and it does kind of fast forward to the Cybercab, but when Tesla starts building that product, and let's say they put 10,000 of them out there, or 25,000, in a quarter or two, that's going to eclipse. I mean, there's only hundreds of these robotaxis out there now. And let's say that there's a year from now that there's a couple thousand of them out there. Tesla, in a quarter of production, they could literally ellipse, they could literally surpass everything that's out there in volume very quickly. And we saw that's what Tesla did too, in terms of autonomous miles. As soon as they flipped on their solution, they were gathering as much miles per day as everybody else combined, times now many times over. So I think he's got about a year. I think Tesla is on this path to I think unsupervised FSD is a gigantic milestone for Tesla. And I think we're going to get the feature complete in terms of fleet communication, reverse. I think that's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. This is what Tesla is telling us. And by the way, on my road trip this weekend, I saw an interesting feature, which was, when you're going between supercharging stations, they tell you how many stalls are open. Well, that's great. They can tell somebody's plugged in, they're charging. That data from the supercharger network goes up and then down to the fleet. So you already had fleet communication there. But I saw an interesting thing. It told me how many vehicles were en route to that supercharging station. So the supercharging station had 8 stalls, 2 were being used, and it told me that 4 other cars were navigating to that station. So that means that 4 other cars had chosen that supercharger, put it into their navigation. That data went up to the Tesla network and then went back down to my vehicle to let me know that 4 other vehicles were on the way. So to me, these features are getting much, much closer. And I think he's got about a year before Tesla starts rolling it out, which means he's only got a couple of months, I think, to figure out a partnership and what Tesla's going to be able to do. So the other thing is, these 3s and Ys that are out there, they don't need to be remanufactured for unsupervised FSD. They've got everything on them they need. So you're going to have a fairly big volume thing if Tesla lights up these states, by the end of next year. And so I think my takeaway here is the time window is actually very short. A year is nothing. And if anything, Tesla said at some point next year that they'll do this. It could be, it could be sooner than a year, but let's say it's a year. That's nothing in time.
Great point. We should do a show actually to talk about all the features that Tesla has or has been already doing that is required for doing a robotaxi service. Wireless charging, the app that you talked about. Many of these companies haven't even thought about this yet. and self-opening doors, presenting doors, those kind of things. Many cars have it already. Okay, so let's just finish this up quickly. Here's what he said, Uber CEO, about FSD and Tesla.
I think Elon eventually will get to viable scale, but for the next 5 years, I bet on Waymo, and we are betting on Waymo.
I'll say this. I don't want to get into an autonomous Tesla in the next 5 years. I'm going to let somebody else can test that out. I'm not going to be an early adopter of that
FSD's getting pretty good. Have you used it recently?
I have not used it
It's
recently.
really good.
Yeah? All right.
Yeah, it's really good. Now, again, for example, the cost of a solid state LiDAR now is $500, $600, right? So why wouldn't you put that into your sensor stack? It's not that expensive. And for a fully self-driving, specialized auto, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Elon has accomplished the unimaginable many, many, many times, so I wouldn't bet against them.
Yeah, I don't know. This is always, my secret dream for you. Obviously you should stay at Uber as long as you want. When you're done with that, I actually do think you should run Tesla, because I think you would be, just as you've done Uber, you'd be willing to make some of the sort of easy compromises, like just put a $500 frickin' LiDAR on the thing and we'd go much, much faster. So anyway, what do you think about that?
I have a full-time job, and I'm very happy with it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, the Tesla board is listening. Just keep this guy in mind. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know if the Tesla board listens to you two.
Good
That's
point.
true. I made too many Kennedy
We're
jokes.
opening up the board meeting with an episode of Hard Fork, everybody.
They could learn a lot from this show.
What's your best guess for when, say, 50% of Uber rides in the U.S. will be autonomous?
I'd say close to 8 to 10 years is my best guess, but I am sure that'll be wrong.
Oh, brother, that was such just knowledge. They have no idea. No, sorry, excuse me.
Herbert, you're going to get demonetized. Okay. Herbert, they should, instead of talking about who should be taking what job, it's almost like maybe their podcasting job may be up for. There was some, it's fine. They're trying to be entertaining, but you don't. Here's the answer to that question. Why not slap a $600 piece of hardware on your product? Here's the answer. Tesla's probably targeting 17,500 or so for the COGS of the Cybercab. If you slap $600 into that bill of material, that's 3% of the, I think 3% or so of the total transformation bill of material cost combined. So that's a big number. The answer is that's a gigantic decision for the future of autonomy, and $600 is too expensive for that, in my opinion. If they don't need that, if that data is not necessary, if it's not viable, you don't do it. That's the answer to that question. That's a huge number in a $17,000 BOM. That's a huge number. So it's not an insignificant thing. So,
okay.
But anyway,
Uber, let's finish this off. They have been buying more electric vehicles, or at least their drivers have been. And this is coming directly from Uber. This is the growth of EVs over time. So clearly,
cost
EVs
of ownership is much lower. This is why they're doing that.
So in the meantime, countries continue to subsidize the fossil fuel cars. Here's the top EU countries spending $45 billion. I'm going to go ahead and just go through all of these stories at once and then have you reply to them. The five biggest members of the EU spend 42 billion euros subsidizing, that's yearly, all these fossil fuel company cars. Italy provides 16 billion euros in subsidies, followed by Germany. Company cars make up around 60% of new car sales in Europe. Completely illogical and completely unacceptable. We're still pouring billions of taxpayer money into technology that's completely contradictory to the green transition agenda. This is according to the director of fleets, Steph Cornelis. EV sales have fallen in part because they are more expensive than fossil fuel equivalent, and they've removed those EV incentives while they continue to provide fossil fuel incentives. So the fully electric cars slumped 43.9% in European Union in August. Biggest EV markets, Germany and France, recorded drops of 70% and 33%. Financial incentives for drivers of company cars to switch are only provided in former EU members. Just the UK is the only place that they continue to do that. AJ pointed out that without these subsidies, gas cars would be uncompetitive with EVs. If you look at France, for example, $15,000 subsidy for buying the petrol BMW X3, and thus disadvantages the BEV versions, which gets only $9,000. So that's how it works. You can see the difference between electric vehicles versus the gas cars. They get more subsidies than EVs. Then in the meantime, German automakers are struggling. If you take a look at the blue line here, that's the EV share of total Chinese car sales going up. And then the German auto market share is just absolutely falling. Volkswagen, Mercedes, and BMWs just falling straight down. In the meantime, this is good to see. Brief slowdown. After a brief slowdown of EV sales in the US, it's now popping back up again. Both BEVs as well as hybrids, they're all popping back up again. There you go. That's a beautiful line trailing third month average. So maybe we've turned the corner of reduced EV sales. Maybe it's associated with this interest rates. Maybe it's just, inventory. And of course, Tesla is absolutely just killing it. If you take a look at Tesla is still the top electric vehicle brand in August with 46% of the US market share, down from 51% compared to last year. But it's still way further ahead than anyone else. And of course, as more companies produce more vehicles, then of course their percentage will go down. But there's no doubt who's leading here. And then I wanted to show you this one, get your opinion on this as well. This is a table created by JPR007. And it's a made-up table, of course, except for the gray lines is real numbers, and you can see where we are, where the actual was in 2022, and then the darker gray is projected, or where that's going to go, and then the blue is all projected here, okay? And then this is all actual up to here, and then all of this is projected. But the point being that whenever you have a disruptive technology, you've got these ICE cars doing really well, and then slowly you get these EV cells. Eventually, the EV cells start taking over. At the same time, exponentially growing, you'll see an exponential decline in the gas cars as well. This is the projection. Thoughts on all that you just saw?
Yeah,
there?
I mean, gas cars peaked somewhere between 2017, 2018, and they've been on a decline ever since. So if you're investing as a supplier, you're investing as a private equity, you're investing for some return on invested capital, you're going uphill. And again, I can't see subsidies necessarily increasing for that either. They would be increasing on the BEV side. So there's this point of no return where it's not going to make sense to do any long-term capital investments. I mean, is ICE going to live for many, many years? The answer is yes. But in terms of like, are you going to put capital behind it and to get some sort of real rate of return? You're going to get it on this explosive growth in BEV. That's where you're going to get the real rate of return. So that's what's happening. And this whole EV adoption curve where we saw the dip in that line chart you were saying, what I was saying all along is actually look at the history over the last 10 years. There's several dips. There was a big dip, I think, in 2017, 2018 from like 3% to 2% or something like that. It's some massive dip. And on a percentage basis, that's huge. But the point is there'll be these, couple of quarters that string together where, you may have some difference in terms of the EV transition and some reduction, or it could flatten out. But then the trend line, so if you draw the trend line, it keeps going up and to the right. So my takeaway here is I don't get too excited about a couple of quarters or even 1 year of slowdown unless there's something that's fundamentally changed in the story. And then when I look at what's happened over that year time frame, the cost of all the core components, unrefined, refined lithium, copper, aluminum, and just the cost of producing EVs continues to actually come down. And as long as that remains true, and there's nothing fundamental that's happening on the demand side, and if anything, this transition to more autonomous robotaxis, it's going to be smaller vehicles, less battery requirement, more vehicles then. And to me, that's going to be a huge jump actually in EV adoption when you have autonomy, because you're not going to do autonomy on ICE, and you're not going to deal with the power consumption, the compute, and so forth on ICE vehicles. And so anyway, I just see this continuing to occur. All the tech development is going to be on the EV side as well, whether it's autonomy or whether it's other infotainment tech. So I just think we see these small disruptions. To me, the key takeaway for people viewing the show is don't over-rotate on a particular quarter or even 2 or 3 quarters. Look at the longer trend line, and then make sure that there's nothing that's fundamentally changed in terms of the offering and the attractiveness of the offering to consumers. And if anything, over that time period, EVs have become cheaper, become more richly featured, become more efficient. And to me, that's the takeaway story. And then this whole investment trend of what's going to happen. And ICE is going to be more expensive, I believe, per mile driven here very soon, if not already. And especially what AJ talked about, it unsubsidized versus subsidized. It probably already is in certain geographies. It's already more expensive. And you can just see it in the numbers. They already peaked in 2017. And when you're beyond your peak, you'd have to do something extremely innovative on the ICE side to figure out how to get your costs back in line. And I don't think the innovation is actually being put there.
Final story here is the patent we discovered here from Tesla. Normally, you should discard whenever you see a patent. Most companies, they're just throw away. They're just trying to protect something. They don't ever make these things. So far, every time we've seen a patent from Tesla, it then becomes true. This one is about DOJO, their high density computing supercomputer. Looks like that they've found a way to have significant cooling for high power electronics an innovative multi-layer cooling system for high-density computing assemblies. It enables efficient thermal management of high-power electronic components in compact structures. This is the system on a wafer chip that they have for DOJO that they've been talking about, and it looks like that they've got this ability to cool every single layer is what this is about. Multi-layer cooling architecture integrates cooling systems between electronic layers, provides efficient double-sided cooling for high-power components. I'm not going to go through all of these details here, but I will just scroll through it quickly. So if you want to, you can pause the video and read about it. System on a wafer layer with integrated circuit, power delivery modules, those kind of things.
Yeah, this is it. This is a physics exercise. This is an exercise in chip on wafer. It's called chip on wafer on substrate, or system on wafer. And Tesla has acquired expertise in this space. And what Elon and Tesla, what I see them always trying to do is like they try to look at a problem and say, all right, this is what everybody else is doing, right? So training compute can be fundamentally limited by the cooling of the system, and there's costs to cool everything. So there's a cost structure in cooling, and the silicon needs to be at a certain temperature to operate at peak efficiency. If you operate at peak efficiency, you're getting more output per system you're buying. So that's what you're optimizing for. So if Tesla can design this in to the chip on wafer on substrate assembly and get better cooling, less external cooling cost, and then more in the actual chip design at a lower cost, they can run more of their silicon at peak efficiency or nominal efficiency and get output. And then it would need less total systems to get the total required output, at the end. So this is, to me, Tesla taking on a physics problem and trying to solve it in a more unique way. Others are going after there's so many people working on infrastructure, on cooling, on systems like this. And to me, this is Tesla going in and trying to, again, use all of the Tesla's, if you go dig deep into the company, what have they been cooling? What have they been working on for decades now? The battery system. And so in terms of like heat transfer, cooling, they have a lot of expertise in this space. And of course they have their own chip design team, but this is not just base silicon. This is an actual system, chip on wafer on substrate system that's being designed and assembled at one of these integrators like a TSMC or a Samsung, or even a global foundries potentially. But one of these major foundries is doing this assembly work. Tesla is going after a physics problem, trying to solve it differently than others to get more efficiency and more output per system. That's key, because you see these big supercluster purchases. I bought 100,000 here, or I bought 50,000 here. The question is, what is the efficiency of the system? What's the training output? What's your uptime? What's your utilization rate on these very expensive $40,000 systems you're buying per GPU? What is the output? And so if Tesla can crack that code and be able to run at higher efficiencies for longer periods of time, that's a game changer from a utilization perspective, which will bring their total cost down. So this was very interesting to me. I'm glad to see them doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate your feedback here. Name of the game, or the summary of this whole show today, is don't bet against Tesla, don't bet against Elon. You had the Uber CEO talking about, that he's basically now worrying about whether Tesla's going to be a competitor or not. He's still playing his game. Then you've got EVs. Obviously, Tesla's EVs is dominating. Now you got technology like this that keeps popping up to show that Tesla's an innovation company. Thank you so much, Jeff. Follow him on his X account at the Jeff Lutz. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Herbert. Thanks, everyone.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.